I just pushed one button. Let me push another button, and then we're good to go.
Hmm. Oh
Now we're
boy,
good to go.
it's
Well,
serious.
hello, everybody, and I am very happy to welcome our honored guest today, Colby College Sensei, who is here. Oh, this is Heiku Jaime McLeod, who is one of our returning champions. This is your second visit here to Treeleaf. And the last time was, I believe, about 5 years ago. So very nice to have you back. And the reason it says Colby College there is I believe you're associated with the museum there.
That's correct. I think my connection's a little bit shaky. I'm gonna switch to my mobile hotspot on my phone and see if that makes it better.
Okay, if you fade away, we'll sit zazen for a couple of minutes while you're going and coming. But I just want to mention that Jamie Heiku is a teacher at the Treetop, not Treeleaf, Treetop Zen Center in Maine, and she is just a very good friend of our Sangha for many years. So very, very glad to have you here. And the chapter we've been looking at that you wrote in the wonderful book, Zen for Challenging Times, it's about the last, we have one more chapter to cover, but we've been spending the last year with that marvelous book. And what you wrote, your essay is certainly one of the highlights there. So before you disappear, I just want to say thank you, Heiku, for being here.
Thank you. I think we're good now. I fixed it while you were talking. So I'm sorry I missed what you were saying, but I'm sure it was entirely too flattering. So I appreciate it. Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
we're just very happy you're here. Now we're gonna sit Zazen just where you are for a couple of minutes, and then I'll turn everything over to you. Okay? So I'm gonna
Beautiful.
ring the little bell here, and then just sit where you are. All right, thank you so much. Without further ado, I'll turn everything over to Heiku and her wonderful essay that reminds us that acceptance and equanimity does not equal uncaring and just being dispassionate. A wonderful message for all of us. Thank you again, Heiku.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. It's really great to be here again. I always enjoy this community. So when Jindo probably a year or more ago asked me if I'd be willing to do this, I was excited to come back. And then when my turn, being I think the last essay in the book, finally came up, I was like, okay, I have to actually write something for this. And as I did that, I was like, well, I kind of said everything I wanted to say in the essay. Like, I don't have a whole lot more to say about that. So I think rather than writing a formal talk, I just thought I'd riff for a little bit on some of the themes that I discussed in the essay. But first, I have a question for folks, and this can be, you can answer if you want, kind of with a show of hands, or you can just kind of, it can be rhetorical and you can know in your head whether this is the case. How many of you have ever been privy to a conversation among Buddhist practitioners that went something like this? Person one, oh, how are you? How are you doing? What's up? Person two, oh, well, I've been kind of struggling with such and such a thing, this situation happened and it's been really difficult, et cetera, et cetera. Person one, well, you know, that's a really powerful opportunity to practice. Have we heard this? Right? Maybe you've said it. I think I've probably said it, right? And this isn't unique to Buddhists, by the way. I think there's lots of versions of this extant in the culture, right? If you talk to a theist person, they might say, well, you know, God will never give you more than you can handle. Well, thanks, God. Thanks for that. I really appreciate your confidence in me, right? Or instead of coming out in this sort of Pollyannaism or this need to make everything be for the best, it can come out in a kind of cynicism or a sort of despairing acceptance, you might call it. So you get a lot of like, well, it is what it is. Which on the surface, it comes out like, oh yeah, that can sound a lot like Buddhist equanimity. If you take away the tone from it, like, yeah, it is what it is. Everything is exactly what it is. Everything is, we say perfect just as it is. But there is this sense of like, well, what are you gonna do? What do you expect me to do about it? It is what it is, right? Um, and all of this, I think, from my perspective, is really antithetical to the true spirit of what our practice is about, which is deeply intimate and interdependent interconnection with everything. It's all part of us, and that means that my pain is your pain, and not to simplify that, right? Like I certainly don't know what everybody has gone through in their lives. I can't always experience everything that everyone experiences, but I can sort of feel with and care for deeply. And there is this sense sometimes in the way that we express our practice that, we should be above that. And there's this teaching within Buddhism about the six realms of existence. You've all heard of this, right? Like the hell dweller realms, the hungry ghosts, the animal realms, human beings, the asuras, the fighting spirits, and the heavenly beings. And some people believe in that as a literal kind of cosmological reality. I happen to be one of the people that believe in it more as a metaphor for psychological states that we can be reborn into at any point during our physical lives here on Earth. And so, we can all think of examples where maybe we're being hell dwellers, right? Where everything sucks and I'm miserable and I'm determined to be miserable no matter what, and I'm just going to infect everything around me with misery, right? That's being a hell dweller, or when we can't think outside of our immediate wants and needs, like when I get really hangry, right? Like that's when I'm in my animal realm, like I just need to eat or I'm gonna right. And I think we tend to think of it from those lower perspectives, right? We tend to write off people who are stuck in addictions as hungry ghosts, right? Things like that. But we don't think as much about the fact that, from a Buddhist perspective, the only place it is said that we can actually experience awakening, experience life in our true illuminate, state of being is in the human being realm. But we don't talk enough about those higher states. We don't talk enough about the heavenly being realm, I think. And so a lot of times, from my perspective, uh, when we come at people with this, like, well, it's just an opportunity to practice kind of saccharine Pollyannaism, we're actually trying to live in the heavenly being realm, I think, instead of in the human realm, which is not, said the Buddha, a place where we can be awake, where we can fully be interconnected with one another, where we can fully express our Buddha nature. Why does that happen? So I think if you're familiar with this theory in antibiotics, you've all heard this, right? That, once upon a time, germs were everywhere. We didn't have a whole lot of antibiotics. We certainly didn't know about them. So there might have been some natural things that had antibacterial properties that we used, but we didn't really understand. And so it was, kind of the germs were winning the war for a long time. And then we discovered antibiotics. It was magical. Things got cleaner, the quality of life improved, lifespans lengthened, all of that. Now we've kind of reached this tipping point where we overuse antibiotics and antibacterial soap so much that we're actually breeding superbugs, right? That we've enabled these microorganisms to evolve, right? We've wiped out the weakest of the species, left the strongest. And so now all of a sudden we have all these viruses that are resistant to these antibiotics and antibacterial soaps and things. No, I'm not just the reason I bring this up is because I think the same thing happens to us in our practice, right? I think that before we start practicing Buddhism, a lot of us, we have so much anger, so much pain, so much aggression in our lives, right? And so any little bit of peace that we give ourselves is miraculous in the way that antibiotics were back before we, were overusing them. We start to settle down a little in our lives. We do, it happens. And so then I think that the three poisons kind of do what viruses do. And I'm not trying to anthropomorphize them here. I'm not trying to ascribe them to some sort of sentient Mara that's out there trying to tempt us, but I still think it happens. I think that the three poisons get a little bit smarter, a little bit subtler, a little bit sneakier in how they come at us. And so now, instead of craving a drink or craving something destructive or craving to put our fist through a wall or any number of things that we might have done, now suddenly we start craving the heavenly being realm. Now we start craving being that equanimous person all the time, that just everything rolls off our backs and everything's a wonderful opportunity to practice, and blessings to you, Buddha to be. And and it's like, is it better? Sure. Maybe you break less bones in your fist and you're not going to get cirrhosis of the liver from that, but we're still separating ourselves from our humanity. We're still not coming to the place where we're actually able to be with our lives. And so to me, I really trust people more that are just able to say, hey, I'm having a hard time with that. It sucks. And, I'm feeling pretty bad about it. I appreciate that more because I think that that's stripping away that subtler sort of level of dukkha that says that, well, as long as I'm not okay with what's happening, I still need to get better. I'm still deficient in my practice. I'm still not Buddhist enough. I'm still not awakened enough. And so until I can say that, everything's wonderful, like I need to get better. I need to get deeper in my practice. And to me, it's like, no, we have to start where we're at. And if where we're at is feeling really miserable about something, that's the reality of the situation. That's where we are, and we have to acknowledge that and start right there, because if we can't be honest with ourselves about what's happening, we can't really deal with it. We're still living in this realm up here, that truly is grounded in craving just as much as any hell realm or hungry ghost realm or animal realm is. So, by the way, I'm a Soto Zen Buddhist, like most of you, and like Jundo, big fan of Dogen. I'm always quoting Dogen, but I came up in a lineage that's a little bit different from some of the more typical Soto Zen traditions. I came up in the White Plum lineage, which is from the lineage brought to America by Taizan Maizumi. And he blended some Rinzai and some Sanbo Kyodan in there. And so I came up in a practice that worked with koans. Didn't actually, interestingly, want to going in. My first teacher that I met was a pure Soto teacher. And so I didn't think much of that, but I moved up here to Maine, where I still live now. And the only Zen teachers here at that time were in that lineage, and I really liked them. It was a sweet old couple, Steph and Margaret Baragato, and they were really down to earth. Steph had been a Quaker for a long time, and so he had this really just kind of plain spoken simplicity that I really appreciated. But they wanted me to do koans, and I wanted to practice with them, and so I did koans. And I will say that I don't think there's any particular magic to that. Um, it got me to know the ancestors really well. It got me to know some of these stories that we have in our shared Zen lore really well. I felt like I kind of met some of those ancestors, and I think it gave me something to talk with my teachers about, that wasn't just my personal life, which could be nice sometimes because I get sick of my personal life. Um, could have as easily talked with them about baseball, but they wanted to talk about koans, and I'm not particularly a sports fan, so koans it was. Um, so when I teach, I use a lot of koans, and you'll notice that in this essay that I wrote, I pulled from a few koans, one of which was case 2 in the Blue Cliff record, where somebody asks Chow Cho, well, I'll just read it. I've got it on my phone because my memory is not that great. So Chow Cho, teaching the assembly, said, "The ultimate path is without difficulty. Just avoid picking and choosing. As soon as there are words spoken, this is picking and choosing, this is clarity. This old monk does not abide within clarity. Do you still perceive anything or not?" At that time, a certain monk said, "Since you do not abide within clarity, what do you preserve?" Chow Cho replied, "I don't know either." The monk said, "Since you don't know, teacher, why do you nevertheless say that you do not abide within clarity?" Chow Cho said, "It's enough to ask about the matter, bow, and withdraw." Now, there could be a million ways to take this koan, a million places to jump off from it and, experience Chow Cho eye to eye. We say, and entangle eyebrows with him, right? But to me, this point of like not abiding in clarity is really the true point here, right? I think, I can only speak for myself, right? I came to Buddhism and I wrote a lot in this essay about how I had trouble with, from a social justice standpoint, the idea of not picking and choosing. I didn't necessarily apply that to myself, though. I think I still came to Buddhism thinking that it was going to fix me somehow, all the stuff that I thought was wrong with me, right? I'm pretty butch, but I think I still had this idea of myself as like Cinderella or Snow White in the forest, and all the little animals were going to come up to me and know that I was so gentle and equanimous, and just see the purity of my spirit, and I would bless people with my presence, and yeah, that has not happened. um but I still had this idea that that I was going to become a better person from this practice, and that my teeth would get whiter and my breath would get fresher and my blood pressure would improve and all of it. um and I think that's a little bit what Chow Cho's talking about here. This idea that at some point we'll get to this state and everything will be well, right? We'll break through it, have a Ken show or whatever, and all of a sudden everything's just going to open up and our lives will be better and we'll be at one with everything and everything will be amazing. And if somebody tries us, they're just a teacher trying to help us be better and all of these things. And Chow Cho's saying, nah, no, that ain't it. That's not gonna happen. And as long as we persist in thinking that that's how we need to deal with adversity and that's how we need to go through life, that's just another layer of craving that we're applying onto ourselves. Like, we're just saying, yeah, I need to be better, I need to get there, my life needs to be different. And maybe your life does need to be different, right? Like, I think I'm very clear in this essay that change needs to happen sometimes, and if we deeply examine ourselves and see that, I'm hurting myself with this behavior or this habitual state of mind that I have or whatever, we have the tools as human beings to make those changes in our lives. We can do that. But as long as we keep telling ourselves this story that, I don't have it until I'm Cinderella in the forest with all the little animals coming around me, then we're not really truly engaging with our lives. I gave this metaphor in the essay about a doctor, right? We tend to think that, being a doctor means that you don't accept what's happening, right? Like, you see your patient and they have cancer, let's say, and I think we have this idea that I have decided that you're not going to have cancer anymore, and no matter what, we're gonna, uh, move forward from this kind of denial of death and cancer. I don't think that's true. I think that to be a person who truly can kind of affect changes in the world, I think you have to have a really sharp-eyed assessment of what is actually happening now. Um, I think that actually it's we can dissociate to the point where we're not willing to acknowledge what's happening because we just don't like the thought that, well, I'm cranky, or I'm I have a problem with anger or whatever, so we deny it. And then we can't do anything about it if we live in this kind of state of denial and dissociating from what really is. And so, I think a doctor, when they go to cure someone of a disease, first, I think most of them, I know there's egomaniacs out there that think that they're God, but for the most part, I think they have to have a really realistic sense of, like, what is possible, and sometimes the only thing that's possible is the mitigation of pain, and I think really good doctors understand that. So that's a place of acceptance. But also, you have to have this acceptance of, this is where we are, this may be where I want to get to, but I can't start from over here. I have to start from here where I am. And I think that's crucial. And I think that that's a thing that can be too easy to miss. I think that we have this whole term, spiritual bypassing, right? Where we think that we can just leap clear of the hard work and just be at the place of bliss. And that's not where things are. Uh, so I talked a little bit about, my having come up in the koan tradition. And so my two first teachers, Steph and Margaret Barragato, Margaret being the other. So I remember when I got the second koan that I talk about in this essay, which is every day is a good day, right? Yunmen said, I don't ask about before the 15th day. Try to say something about after the 15th day. Yunmen answered himself for everyone, every day is a good day. Now, probably you've heard this koan or some version of it. It's pretty famous, I think, even outside of Zen. Um, by the way, I'm a Trekkie also, and so I always want to add to die at the end, like a Klingon. But um, but so I was familiar with this saying before I got this koan as something that I was supposed to practice with my teacher. And then when I came across it, steeped in that very sort of, and not through any fault of my teachers, by the way, they were very realistic, down to earth people, but steeped from the wider kind of Buddhist, particularly online culture, I had this idea that I was supposed to be, oh, everything's wonderful, everything's an opportunity to practice. But I was in a spot where I was feeling ornery about that. And there's a thing that can happen in koan practice where you intellectually know the answer. And people say you can't fake it. You can fake it. If you intellectually kind of know what the answer is, you can just go in there and bullshit if you want. But I was feeling really ornery about this. Every day is a good day. I don't remember quite what I was going through in my personal life at the time, but I was not having it with this koan. I sort of knew what I was supposed to come in and do or say, but was just not going to do that. And so I sat down across from my teacher and I recited the koan as I just recited it to you from memory. And then I looked at my teacher and I said, "That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard." And she laughed, like I caught her off guard. She was just like, "What?" Um, and we had a conversation about it. And I don't actually remember the content of that conversation that well anymore, but I do remember the vehemence with which I was just offended at this idea that, like, oh, every day is a good day. Like, I was like, no, I mean, if you come at it from a social justice standpoint or caring about the human race standpoint, it's like, kids are starving, kids are getting bombed, like people are, doing all kinds of things. No, every day is not a good day. I refuse to say that. Um, and she was able to hear that. I think she was she could be a tough character too. Um, and so we talked about this idea of, like, we're not talking about good from the sense of like picking and choosing good or bad, like uh from a qualitative standpoint. We're talking about, like, every day is just the day that we have, and this is the only place where we can affect anything. Um, and that's really what this case is talking about, that, today is what we've got, and that's not an it is what it is, and it's not, the Lord's only going to give us as much as we can handle, and it's not like, well, this is just a marvelous opportunity to practice. It's like, no, this is the day that we have, and this is where I have to start. And so that means facing what is. And if what is that I don't want to believe that every day is a good day, well, that's where I'm at, you know, and that's got to be okay sometimes. I also talked a lot in this essay about this book, The Survivors Club by Ben Sherwood, which I read early in my practice journey. I mean, I don't think that book was quite written when I first started practicing Zen, but it came out a few years later, and I saw an article about it online somewhere, and so I picked it up. And I really liked this idea that, you know, or not liked, but I was really taken by this idea that it's often the refusal to be able to deal with what's happening, this sort of, I think dissociation really is the word, this removal of ourselves from the reality of what's happening right here, that makes it impossible, I think, for some people to persevere with the difficult experiences in their lives. And that's, again, not, I don't think that somebody's in a plane crash sitting there saying, like, well, this is a wonderful opportunity to practice, right? Like, no, but there is this sort of like acceptance of, okay, this has happened, now what? Now what? And so that's where I really am with it. And I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say about that. I think I really wanted to kind of hear from all of you and kind of what you took from this essay, what spoke to you, or with this being near the end of this series that you've all been doing for more than a year, kind of what any of you have picked up on how to face adversity from the standpoint of practice. What have some of these other teachers that you've heard from said that have stuck with you? Because I certainly don't have all the answers. I talked last time I was with you about my daughter who has cerebral palsy. And I think maybe at the time that I spoke here last, I was hoping that outcomes for her might be a little bit different, but she's 5 now and is a power wheelchair user. She recently got a feeding tube implanted. She can still eat, but we have to use a feeding tube to help her get enough nutrients because she's not a very efficient eater. When she does eat food by mouth, it has to be fed to her bite by bite, and then a lot of times it comes back out and has to go back in. And so I spend most of my time caring for her when I'm not at my day job at Colby College. And so it doesn't leave me a lot of time for writing talks and things like that anymore. And um, you know, I think that I lived in denial for a long time about like, well, it's gonna change, it'll get better. I was telling myself that that her situation would be different, and as that unfolded, we kind of learned what the truth of that was, and that's something that I still struggle with every day. That's the big one of the major adversities in my life, but also a wonderful opportunity to practice because I love her, and I wouldn't, I certainly would wish that her life would be easier, and that some of the hardships that she has to face that she wouldn't have to face, because none of us ever want the people that we care for to experience pain. But at the same time, it is what it is. And so I get up every day and I just care for her and I do my best. And I don't know that there's much more than that any of us can do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Heiku, and just so much common sense and wise. Anyone here have comments or questions? Please raise your hand, and now's your chance. Also, let me mention if we do have some folks who are watching at home, and if you have a question, you can email me at jundotreeleaf, one word, at gmail.com, and I will sneak it in to Heiku today. Koku, you have a question?
Oh, Heiku, thank you so much for that and for your essay. I don't know if this is a comment or a question. It's just, I guess it's more thoughts. I first read this book 4 or 5 years ago, and some of the essays stood out, and I must admit yours wasn't one of them. But I came to it, I read it more recently, and this has been an ongoing koan for me in the last few years, is how to combine the idea of don't know mind and all those things, every day is a good day, with facing social justices, pain, suffering. As you probably know, I've got a long-term chronic illness, and I've been working with other people with chronic illness. Sorry, my dogs are going off. Yesterday in my chronic illness community, a woman chose voluntary euthanasia over continuing to live with the illness. She was 28 years old. And I've learned a lot in our community of chronic ill people is you don't go to them and say things like, this is good for practice or every day is a good day. I think these are brilliant koans to take personally and work with personally. They're not something you say to someone else. Even when I was early on my Buddhist journey, I've been sick for 28 years, and pretty much that's my Buddhist journey as well. It's what brought me to practice because of the suffering of illness. And people did used to come and say to me, oh, illness is a great teacher. And I was like, well, would you like it? If it's such a great teacher, you have it. And I say I have worked, all these koans are deeply meaningful, and all these things are deeply meaningful for me now. But I still wouldn't want somebody to come and say those things to me. And so I refrain from saying them to other people. If they work these things out themselves, that's great. But everyone's at a different place. And yeah, just moving on to just I have been grappling with this idea of don't know, mind every day's a good day. And like you say, kids are getting killed with bombs. Some don't get enough to eat. Some have got no shelter. Some have got no parents. And how do you, I guess, how do you kind of make that? Where's the place where that meets? And it is like you put now, it's just doing the next thing with your daughter. You know, like you say, we don't want our loved ones to suffer. My 18-year-old's just come through a year of anorexia. We don't want them to suffer. How do you deal with that? And the fact you don't want it to happen. It's like you say with the doctors, you have to first of all accept this is the situation. You don't want this to be a situation. You probably don't want your daughter to have cerebral palsy, even though cerebral palsy doesn't mean that people can't enjoy life and can't be a totally full and complete human being. And there's, I guess that I'm just rambling now, so I'll stop very soon. But yeah, there's that deeper acceptance of this is what reality looks like. Now, what am I going to do with it? And it's like that, whether it's the kids being bombed, what am I going to do about it? I can't necessarily stop it. Maybe we can do something. But with, I think, the people in front of us, it's easier to see, isn't it? Your daughter needs whatever she needs. You do it. My daughter needed me to turn up to meetings with psychologists. She needed me to help her when she was eating, whatever. And I guess that's just it. We can't plan. We can't logically work out how we're going to deal with this. But as each thing arises, I guess we have to drop off a lot of what we think we know and just say, what does this look like now? And what am I going to do about it? And that's all I get. And this is part of what I'm saying is what I've got from reading your essay. And it was just so, I guess it kind of met me just where I'm at right now and just really, really spoke to me. So yeah, I just wanted, I guess, yeah, no real questions. I just wanted to say, I'm deeply grateful for your essay. I'm deeply grateful for you coming here. And thank you so much. I've got to give my dogs to the neighbors.
Well, thank you.
I'll be back in just a minute.
Sure. I have a response to that, but I want him to come back. So maybe somebody else has a question or a comment in the meantime.
Pretty good.
I see a hand, Daimon.
Yes. Thank you so much for your talk, and your essay really was inspirational to me for my personal life. And as someone who does psychotherapy with people with mental health issues and substance abuse issues, it really spoke to me because when I'm working with people with a host of presenting problems that they have, we always start from the place of accepting, trying to get to that level of accepting what's happening right now. But not to say, okay, there it is, now you know what's happening. But starting from that place, right, where you recognize, because a lot of people will come into treatment with, take this away from me as quickly as you possibly can. So starting from that place of, this is kind of how it is right now. This is how it's affecting you. This is what you're feeling. Then the feelings come up. And then we're able to sit with those things and give enough space for those things to be there. And then you see the healing take place. When people don't want to do any of that and go immediately to the, please take this away from me. I don't want it to be like this. I want to sit in the wilderness with the birds talking to me and everything's just beautiful. We start from that place of suffering. So when I read your essay, it was like, yes, this is inspirational to me to continue to just, let's start here at this place. And I just want to say one more thing, that every time I pick this book up, I can't help but think of my original Soto teacher, Diane Benaj, because I went to visit her a few months ago, and she's in an assisted living facility because of her poor memory. Her memory is bad about things that happen right now, but her memory is not bad about all the things that happened in the past. So she's still very, very clever as a teacher and as a person. And we were getting ready to sit Zazen, and she said, "Oh, Daimon, I don't have my striker for the bell." And she said, "Oh, just hand me that pen over there." And she rang the bell with her pen, and we sat Zazen. And this is someone who realizes what's happened to her, but she still has this presence within all of that, as just a wonderful person and teacher, and someone who recognizes that what's happening right now in this moment, even in the midst of all of this suffering, is the place where we live our lives. So thank you so much again for your teaching. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I just had a quick response to Koku, as you were talking about kind of taking this idea that something's an opportunity for practice within ourselves, but not necessarily saying that to other people. I think you're exactly right. That's how I tend to look at it. I mean, one of the things that I think attracted me to Zen was when I was talking to the first teacher I ever met, who was Kyoki Roberts in Pittsburgh. She was talking about how some other person was accusing her of breaking the precepts. And she said, well, first of all, they're my precepts, not yours. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting way of approaching these things that I think it had occurred to me, but I didn't use that language for it. And I think that's really how I always thought about kind of ethics and kind of deeper practices, is that like these are things that we use to work with ourselves. They're not things that we use to beat up other people or try to instruct other people. I mean, I happen to be a teacher, and so I actually do have to instruct other people sometimes, but I find that it's not useful to do that with platitudes and finger shaking and shoulds and things. I find that if somebody comes to me with a problem that they want to talk through, I'm not a psychotherapist. I don't have that training. I'm not interested in psychotherapizing anybody, but people do come with struggles that they have, and so I'm often in the position of kind of going, okay, what's the spiritual component of this that I can engage with this person on? And it's never a good thing to tell somebody, well, this is where you should be with this, right? Because they're not. And so we've got to start where they actually are with it, and then you can kind of ask some exploring questions about like, well, how's that working out for you, or whatever. So I think that's 100% true, right? But at the same time, you notice that I ended this talk saying that my daughter's illness actually is for me an opportunity to practice. I wouldn't always call it a wonderful one, but it is the place where I get the most mileage out of my practice. I think it is the place that has tested me the most, and that's true, while at the same time I'd probably want to punch anybody that said that to me, right? And so I think that is the difference, right? It takes it from a platitude to a place where the rubber actually hits the road. Like, how am I going to practice with this? What am I going to do? How does this thing that I'm thinking about doing align with my ethics or my sense that I'm interconnected with everybody and everything? And is this course of action that I'm thinking about, like, does that actually align with that? So I think those are all places in our practice journeys that we do have to deeply engage, but we're not going to do that from the place of pretending that we're some heavenly being that doesn't feel any of it and doesn't care about any of it. And also the story you were telling about your daughter, makes me think about love and how we practice love, because I think that there can be this misconception that as Buddhists who are unattached, that we don't love, that we don't feel deeply. And that's not it at all. To me, I think it's a difference in quality of how we love. And so somebody else might have a child going through that experience and not be able to acknowledge it, right? They need that child to be the person that they imagine them to be in their heads. And that does not involve having an eating disorder, right? And so I love the version of you that I've created in my head. But real love is actually saying, like, oh, God, there's this thing and we need to deal with this together because I love you and I'm here in this with you. I think that's the real difference.
Thank you so much, Heiku.
Well, before I ask if anyone else, I do have a quick question, a little bit unrelated to your essay, but you're also a professional journalist, Heiku. And around here, at least in our Sangha, I want to say we respect the journalists and the media. There is such a thing as journalistic ethics, and I'm sure you have it. But I want to know how is a Zen teacher, how has being a Zen teacher and practitioner influenced you as a journalist? Is it different than you think you would be otherwise?
Well, I've not been a practicing journalist. I am an editor. I do a lot of editing. You saw in my bio, I still do some copy editing for Buddha Dharma magazine. I just copy edited a few essays this week from a Vajrayana perspective, which is always interesting. But I haven't done actual reporting very much in a while. But I do remember, I think I was earlier still in my practice journey when I was still writing, and mostly I had like hyper local beats, which means like I covered school boards and town councils and things. And I remember sitting in these meetings and listening to these people argue with one another about kind of the most minute points of law and town code. And I mean, these folks would get into like 45-minute really bitter arguments about sewage codes and things. I mean, it was insane. And I think that my Zen practice helped me to see early on, like, the fact that these folks are not talking to one another. They are talking to a person that they've concocted in their heads, who they thinks a specific thing that the person sitting across from them doesn't seem to actually think or be saying. And I think that actually applies to what we're talking about here, is because so often I think we go like Don Quixote, kind of to war against the dragon that we see, and and we get ourselves all worked up, and we never actually see what's actually in front of us, which is usually just a person who has a point of view that may not agree with ours, that we can't bring ourselves to listen to because we can't accept that this point of view, no matter how banal it may be, if it's about how you connect sewage and whatever, like, that we can get so heated that we can't hear each other. And that was, I don't know that affected how I did my practice of journalism, but it certainly helped me try to be a little bit more fair to the points of view, and like recognize the ways that we get so entrenched in how we see reality that we're actually missing reality so much of the time.
Well, while we have her here, anyone have any more comments or questions? Now's your chance. Onki, looks like you have something, yes?
Hey, sorry. Thank you so much for the talk. It was definitely something that I needed to hear right now at this point in my life and in my Buddhist practice. I do have a question. As a person with mental illness and someone who has faced all kinds of trauma, you were talking about don't know mind and just doing the next thing that needs to be done. So with all of these within the mental illness and within the trauma, I have this strong need to feel safe. So I was wondering, how are you able to feel safe in don't know mind when, I don't know, when there's been a lot of mental health challenges and a lot of childhood trauma stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm, I don't want to compare myself to you or say we're in the same boat because I don't know what you've been through. But I wrote in my essay, like I had a therapist once say to me, I kind of, it was one of those initial getting to know you appointments where they're just like, okay, why are you here? And I just kind of laid it all out. And the woman said to me, so has anyone ever told you you have an extensive trauma history? And I just laughed. Well, nobody's put it quite that way, but yeah. So I definitely hear you on that. And I'm a person who, I think one of the things that brought me to Zen was actually that I have a great deal of anxiety, and I didn't always recognize it as that. To me, it kind of manifests as sort of like constant just kind of irritation and like snappiness and so 20 odd years into my Zen practice, that hasn't gone away. I still physiologically, I'm a person that just feels a lot of anxiety in my body, and cortisol flaring up about answering an email or making a phone call, or so I get that. I do. And I don't know that I have an answer for you, except that I think, I don't think don't know means, I don't think it means stepping off the 100-foot pole necessarily, right? I don't think it means having complete faith and just throwing ourselves into whatever. I think it means staying grounded in what is instead of what we think is. And so again, I'm not a psychotherapist. I can't give psychological advice, but I do think that there is a lot of overlap between some of the grounding kinds of exercises that they give in like cognitive behavioral therapy and what we think of as mindfulness. Like, let's just pay attention to what's really happening. I think it's getting out of your head and the story that we're wanting to tell about things, and like saying, no, okay, what is it really? What's happening? And maybe what's happening is just that my pulse is racing and I have a sick feeling in my stomach, and that's the place to start, right? So it's not I think there is this kind of macho kind of almost like fear factor-ish sort of thing that happens in Zen, where you'll get some practitioners that are like, you just have to strip away all your safety and just throw it, and it's like, no. Sure, if you're a person that really wants gets your dopamine from thrilling yourself with scare tactics, sure, you can go for that. But I think for most of us, don't know is really about like getting out of our heads about what we think is happening and actually coming face to face with what is in fact happening. And that's always going to be mediated, by the way, through what's in our heads. I don't think that we can fully escape that ever, as long as we live in a corporeal body where everything comes in through our senses and goes into the electric meatball in our heads, things are always going to be mediated by our sense of things, but we can try and get closer and closer to paying attention to what's really there and kind of settling down that way. I don't know if that's what you were asking, but that's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anyone have any more? Now's your chance. We had just one comment, and I just lost it, I think. But Tyron, who can't be here today, said he wanted to quote all of the parts of your essay that meant something to him, but it would be all of it. So
Thank you.
anyone else? Going once? Going twice? All right. I will just say, Heiku, let's start planning for your third visit. Somewhere in I hope not too long from now. Do you have any closing words you'd like to leave us with?
I don't. It was just a pleasure to be here with you. I think this community is something really special, and I so appreciate the opportunity to spend the morning with you.
Well, very, very good. So I will. All right. On that note, I will thank everybody. I have to admit, I'm maybe a little selfish here. It's way past my bedtime, so I hope I'm not rushing things too much. But shall we, Kote? Do you want to close us with the verse to close today?
So we will chant the verse of atonement of the 4 vows, yes?
Okay.
All harmful acts, words, and thoughts ever committed by me since of old, on account of beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and mind, now I atone for them all. To save all sentient beings, though beings numberless, to transform all delusions, though delusions inexhaustible, to perceive reality, though reality is boundless, to attain the enlightened way, a way non-attainable, to save all sentient beings, though beings numberless, to transform all delusions, though delusions inexhaustible, to perceive reality, though reality is boundless, to attain the enlightened way, a way non-attainable, to save all sentient beings, though beings numberless, to transform all delusions, though delusions inexhaustible, to perceive reality, though reality is boundless, and to attain the enlightened way, a way non-attainable.
Well, thank you again. Today certainly was a good day. So I will leave you there and just thank you, Heiku, again. All right, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. See you guys later.